Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a gripping story that'll pull at your heartstrings and keep you on the edge of your seat. It's a tale of joy, loss, and a mystery that unravels over 15 years. Picture this. A young guy fresh out of college, ready to take on the world, disappears without a trace after his graduation party. What happened to him? Where did he go? Grab a snack, settle in, and let's get started with the graduation day. The sun was shining bright over Boston, Massachusetts, on a warm May morning in 2010. The campus of Northeastern University buzzed with excitement. Graduates in black, caps and gowns milled around, snapping photos, laughing, and hugging their families. It was the kind of day where everything felt possible, like the world was just waiting for you to make your mark. In the middle of it all stood Ethan Carter, 22 years old, with a grin that could light up the whole quad. He'd just earned his degree in computer science after 4 grueling years of late-night study sessions, endless coding projects, and final exams that felt like running a marathon with no finish line. Ethan wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he had this quiet confidence that drew people in. His dark hair was a little messy under his cap, and his green eyes sparkled as he scanned the crowd for his parents. "Ethan, over here!" his mom, Emily, called out. Waving her phone to snap a picture, she was a small woman with warm brown eyes and a smile that hadn't faded despite the long drive from their home in Connecticut. Next to her, Ethan's dad, John, stood tall, his usual stoic face softened by pride. They'd always been Ethan's biggest cheerleaders, the kind of parents who showed up to every school event, no matter how small. "Mom, enough with the photos," Ethan laughed, jogging over to wrap her in a hug. "I'm not going anywhere." "Not yet, kiddo," Emily teased, squeezing him back. "But you're officially a college grad now. We're so proud of you." John clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You worked hard for this, son. Tonight, you celebrate. We've got a surprise." "For you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A surprise? What's that about?" "You'll see," John said with a rare grin. "Just be ready by 6. Your friends are in on it too." The surprise, as it turned out, was a big night out. Ethan's parents had booked a private room at a trendy bar downtown for him and his closest friends to celebrate. It wasn't their usual style. John and Emily were more about quiet family dinners than loud parties. But they knew how much this milestone meant to Ethan. He'd been under so much pressure, especially with those brutal final exams. This was their way of saying, "You did it. Now, go have some fun." As the afternoon rolled on, Ethan joined his friends for photos on the Charles River Esplanade. The group was tight-knit, the kind of crew that had survived group projects and all-nighters together. There was Mike, the loud jokester who could make anyone laugh, Jenna, the planner who always had a schedule for everything, and Sarah, the quiet one with a sharp wit and a smile that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. Sarah was special. She and Ethan had been dancing around their feelings for months, sharing late-night study sessions in the library, sneaking glances over coffee cups. Just a week ago, under the glow of a street lamp outside her dorm, Ethan had finally worked up the nerve to tell her how he felt. To his relief, she felt the same. They'd agreed to keep it low-key for now, not wanting to stir up drama in their friend group. But every time their eyes met, it was like a secret only they shared. "Yo, Ethan, you gonna stand there daydreaming or take this picture?" Mike called, tossing a football at him. Ethan caught it with a laugh, shaking off his thoughts. "Chill, man, I'm ready," Ethan shot back, striking an exaggerated pose with Sarah and Jenna. The camera clicked, freezing the moment. 4 friends, young and invincible, with the Boston skyline sparkling behind them. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the city, Ethan felt like he was on top of the world. He had his degree, his family, his friends, and Sarah. Whatever came next, job applications, grad school, the real world, he was ready for it. The group headed to the bar around 7. It was one of those places with exposed brick walls, dim lighting, and a playlist of indie rock hits. The private room was decked out with balloons and a banner that read, "Congrats, Class of 2010. Ethan's parents were there to kick things off, sharing a quick toast before leaving the kids to their party. "To Ethan," Emily said, raising a glass of sparkling cider. "And to all of you, for chasing your dreams. Here's to new beginnings." Everyone cheered, clinking glasses. Ethan caught Sarah's eye across the room, and she gave him a small, private smile. For a moment, everything was perfect, but not everyone was in the mood to celebrate. Across the room, Liam, another friend from their computer science classes, nursed a beer in silence. He was tall, with sharp features, and a brooding vibe that some girls found charming. Liam had always been competitive with Ethan, whether it was grades, internships, or just who could tell the better joke. Tonight, though, something else was eating at him. He kept glancing at Sarah, then at Ethan, his jaw tightening every time they laughed together. "Dude, you good?" Mike asked, nudging Liam. "Yeah, fine," Liam muttered, taking a long sip of his drink, but his eyes never left Ethan. As the night wore on, the music got louder, the drinks flowed, and the room filled with laughter and stories. Ethan and Sarah stole a moment by the bar, their hands brushing as they talked about their plans for the summer. For the first time in months, Ethan felt light, like the weight of exams and deadlines had finally lifted. "I'm glad you're here," he said softly, leaning closer to Sarah. "Me too," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They didn't notice Liam watching from the corner, his grip tightening on his glass. By midnight, the party was still going strong, but Ethan was ready to call it a night. He'd had a couple of beers, but he wasn't much of a drinker. "I'm going to head out," he told Sarah, squeezing her hand. "See you tomorrow." "Text me when you get home," she said, her eyes warm but worried. Ethan nodded, grabbed his jacket, and waved goodbye to the group. "Catch you guys later," he called, stepping out into the cool night air. The street was quiet, the city lights reflecting off the pavement. He pulled out his phone to text his parents that he was on his way home. That was the last anyone saw of him. By morning, Ethan's phone was off. His bed was empty. His parents, frantic, called his friends, the police, anyone who might know where he was. But no one had answers. It was as if Ethan Carter had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a family desperate for the truth and a mystery that would haunt them for 15 years. The bar was pulsing with energy as the clock ticked past midnight. The private room at the Rusty Anchor was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the thump of indie rock from the speakers. Balloons bobbed in the corner, and the "Congrats, Class of 2010" banner fluttered above the crowd. Ethan Carter had just left, his jacket slung over his shoulder, waving a quick goodbye to his friends. The cool May air swallowed him as he stepped onto the Boston street, his phone glowing as he typed a text to his parents, heading home. "Love you?" Inside, the party didn't skip a beat. Sarah leaned against the bar, stirring her drink, her eyes lingering on the door Ethan had walked through. She couldn't shake a weird feeling, like something was off, but she brushed it aside. Ethan was fine. He was just tired, probably already halfway to his apartment. She smiled to herself, thinking about their quiet moment earlier, the way his hand had brushed hers. Across the room, Liam sat slouched in a booth, his third beer half empty in front of him. His sharp features were set in a scowl, and his fingers tapped restlessly on the table. Mike, always the life of the party, slid into the seat across from him, grinning. "Yo, Liam, you look like someone stole your dog. Lighten up, man. We're graduates." Liam forced a smirk, but his eyes darted to Sarah. Yeah, I'm good," he muttered, taking a swig. But he wasn't good. He hadn't been all night. Every time Ethan and Sarah laughed together, it was like a knife twisting in his chest. Liam had liked Sarah for months, maybe even longer. He'd never said it out loud, but he thought she knew. And now, seeing her with Ethan, it was like the ground was slipping out from under him. "Come on, let's do shots," Jenna called, waving everyone over. She was the group's unofficial organizer, always making sure no one was left out. Sarah joined her, laughing as Jenna tried to balance a tray of tequila shots. The group gathered, raising their glasses, but Liam stayed. In his booth, watching. "Dude, get over here!" Mike shouted, but Liam just waved him off. "I'm good," Liam said, his voice flat. He didn't feel like celebrating, not tonight. The night stretched on, and the drinks kept flowing. Sarah stuck close to Jenna, trying to shake the unease that had settled in her stomach. She checked her phone. No text from Ethan yet. He's probably just passed out already, she thought, but she sent him a quick message anyway. "You home safe?" Meanwhile, Liam's mood grew darker. He'd seen the way Sarah looked at Ethan, the way they'd whispered to each other by the bar. It wasn't just a crush anymore. It was something real, and it made his blood boil. He drained his beer and grabbed another, ignoring Mike's attempt to pull him into a game of pool. Around 1 a.m., things started to heat up. Mike, a little too tipsy, was telling a loud story about a disastrous group project from sophomore year, and the group was in stitches. Sarah laughed, but her eyes kept flicking to her phone. Still no reply from Ethan. That's when Liam finally snapped. He stood up, a little unsteady, and made his way over to Sarah. "Hey," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Can we talk?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard. Sure. What's up?" Liam leaned in, his breath heavy with alcohol. "What's going on with you and Ethan? I saw you two all cozy earlier." Sarah's face flushed. She hadn't expected this, not here, not now. "Liam, it's not. Look, can we talk about this later?" "No, I want to know now," he pressed, his voice rising. Heads started to turn. Mike noticed and wandered over, sensing trouble. "Dude, chill," Mike said, clapping a hand on Liam's shoulder. "This is a party, not a soap opera." But Liam shook him off, his eyes locked on Sarah. "You think you can just string me along and then go for Ethan? What's so great about him, huh?" Sarah's heart raced. She didn't know Liam felt this way, not like this. "Liam, you're drunk. Let's not do this." "I'm not drunk," he snapped, though his slurred words said otherwise. "I just want to know why you picked him." The room went quiet, the music suddenly feeling too loud. Jenna stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Okay, Liam, you need to cool it. You're making a scene." But Liam wasn't listening. He took a step closer. To Sarah, his face twisted with anger and hurt. That's when Mike had enough. He grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him back. "Back off, man!" It happened fast. Liam swung around, shoving Mike hard. The two stumbled, knocking over a table. Glasses crashed to the floor and someone yelped. Sarah stepped back, her heart pounding. "Stop it!" Jenna shouted, jumping between them. A couple of other friends rushed over, pulling Liam and Mike apart. Liam was breathing hard, his fists clenched, while Mike glared at him, rubbing his shoulder. "You're out of line, Liam," Mike said, his voice low. "Go home." Liam didn't say another word. He grabbed his jacket, shot one last look at Sarah, and stormed out of the bar. The door slammed behind him, leaving an awkward silence in its wake. Sarah's hands were shaking. She felt eyes on her, but all she could think about was Ethan. She checked her phone again. Still nothing. "I need some air," she mumbled, stepping outside. The cool night hit her like a slap, but it didn't clear the knot in her chest. She dialed Ethan's number. Straight to voicemail. Back inside, the party slowly picked back up. Jenna rallied everyone, trying to salvage the night. "He's just drunk," she told the group. "Let's not let this ruin things." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She texted Ethan again. "Please call me." By 2 a.m., the party was winding down. People started heading out, calling cabs or walking to the T-station. Sarah said her goodbyes, her mind still on Ethan. She didn't know why she was so worried. He was probably fine, right? Just asleep in his apartment, his phone dead. But Ethan wasn't asleep. He wasn't in his apartment. And as the hours ticked by, his parents, John and Emily, were about to wake up to a nightmare. The next morning, Emily knocked on Ethan's door, expecting to find him sprawled across his bed, maybe still in his clothes from the night before. "Ethan, honey, you up?" she called, her voice light. No answer. She pushed the door open. The bed was made, untouched. His phone wasn't on the nightstand. His keys weren't on the hook. Emily's smile faded. She called his name again, louder this time, checking the bathroom, the living room. Nothing. "John!" she shouted, her voice cracking. Her husband rushed in, his face already tightening with worry. They called Ethan's phone. Voicemail. They called his friends. Mike said Ethan left the party early. Jenna said he seemed fine. Sarah said she hadn't heard from him since he left. By noon, panic had set in. John drove to the bar, asking the staff if they'd seen anything. Emily called the police, her hands trembling, as she described her son, 22, dark hair, green eyes, about 6 feet tall. The officer was kind, but not optimistic. "He's a young guy, probably just crashed at a friend's place. Give it a day." But a day turned into 2, then a week, then a month. The police searched, put up flyers, questioned Ethan's friends. Nothing turned up, no credit card charges, no phone pings, no sightings. It was like Ethan had stepped out of that bar and into another world. Emily and John clung to hope, but it was slipping through their fingers. They sat in Ethan's room, staring at his untouched books, his laptop, the life he'd left behind. "He wouldn't just leave," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not without telling us." John squeezed her hand, his jaw tight. "We'll find him," he said. But his voice shook. They didn't know it would take 15 years to uncover the truth, and when they did, it would break their hearts all over again. The morning sun did nothing to ease the knot in Emily Carter's stomach. She sat at the kitchen table in their modest Connecticut home, her coffee untouched, staring at the phone that refused to ring. John paced the living room, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Ethan had been gone for hours now, and every call to his phone went straight to voicemail. The police had told them to wait, but waiting felt like drowning. Their son, their bright, kind-hearted Ethan, was out there somewhere, and they had no idea where. "Let's go back to the bar," John said suddenly, grabbing his keys. "Maybe someone saw something last night." Emily nodded, her eyes red from crying. She didn't have the energy to argue, and she couldn't sit still any longer. They drove to the Rusty Anchor in silence, the Boston skyline looming ahead like a taunt. The bar looked different in the daylight, shabby almost, with its neon sign turned off and a lone bartender sweeping the sidewalk. "We're looking for our son," John told the manager, a tired-looking guy named Pete. "He was here last night at the graduation party." Ethan Carter, about 6 feet, dark hair, green eyes. Pete scratched his head, thinking. "Yeah, I remember the party, big group of college kids. But I didn't see anything weird. They were loud, but no trouble." "Your son leave early?" "His friend said he left around midnight," Emily said, her voice shaking. "He was supposed to come home." Pete frowned, then called over a waitress who'd worked the shift. "Hey, Maria, you remember a kid leaving early last night? Dark hair, grad party?" Maria nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so. Tall guy, right? He was one of the first to go. Walked out alone. Looked fine to me." Emily's heart sank. Fine. Everyone kept saying Ethan was fine, but he wasn't. She could feel it, like a mother's instinct screaming in her bones. Back at the bar last night. The air had been thick with celebration before things went south. The private room was packed, the music cranking out hits from the early 2000s. Ethan had been in high spirits, joking with Mike, stealing glances at Sarah. He'd felt like the luckiest guy in the room, with his degree in hand and Sarah's smile, lighting up his world, but not everyone was feeling the love. Liam, brooding in his corner, had been watching Ethan all night. He'd noticed the way Sarah leaned into Ethan's jokes, the way her hand brushed his arm. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a fire in his chest, burning hotter with every drink. Liam had liked Sarah since their first group project together back in sophomore year. He'd never said it outright, but he thought she'd pick up on it. Instead, she'd chosen Ethan. By 11:30 p.m., the party was at its peak. Mike was leading a group in a terrible karaoke version of Sweet Caroline, and Jenna was passing out another round of drinks. Ethan and Sarah stood by the bar, talking. Quietly, their heads close together. "You're going to kill it out there," Sarah said, her eyes shining. "All those tech companies are going to be fighting over you." Ethan grinned, a little shy. Maybe, but I'm more excited about, us. Sarah blushed, nudging him playfully. Smooth talker. That's when Liam made his move. He'd been watching from across the room, his beer bottle sweating in his hand. He pushed through the crowd, his steps unsteady, and stopped in front of Ethan and Sarah. "What's this?" he said, his voice loud enough to cut through the music. "You two a thing now?" Ethan straightened, his smile fading. "Liam, man, what's your deal?" "My deal?" Liam laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. "My deal is you acting like you own the place, stealing what's not yours." Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. "Liam, stop. You're making this weird." "Weird?" Liam's eyes flashed. "You think it's weird that I'm calling this out?" "I've been here, Sarah. I've been right here, and you pick him?" The room started to quiet. Mike, sensing trouble, pushed through the crowd. "Yo, Liam, take it easy," he said, putting a hand on his shoulder, but Liam shook him off, stepping closer to Ethan. "You think you're better than me, Carter? Mr. Perfect, with your fancy internships and your stupid grin?" Ethan held up his hands, trying to stay calm. "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Let's just chill, okay?" But Liam wasn't chilling. He shoved Ethan hard, enough to make him stumble into the bar. Glasses rattled, and someone gasped. Ethan caught himself, his jaw tight. "Liam, back off," he said, his voice low but steady. Sarah grabbed Ethan's arm. "Let's go, Ethan. He's not worth it." But Liam wasn't done. He lunged forward, swinging a clumsy fist. Ethan ducked, grabbing Liam's arm to stop him. The two grappled for a moment, knocking over a chair. The crowd surged around them, shouting. Mike and another friend, Chris, jumped in, pulling Liam back. "Enough!" Jenna yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're ruining the night." Liam struggled against Mike's grip, his face red with anger. "Let me go!" Ethan stepped back, breathing hard. He looked at Sarah, then at Liam. "I'm out," he said quietly. He grabbed his jacket, gave Sarah a quick nod, and headed for the door. "I'll see you guys later." Sarah watched him go, her heart racing. She wanted to follow, but Jenna held her back. "Let him cool off," Jenna said. "He's fine." Liam, still held by Mike, glared at the door as Ethan disappeared into the night. His fists were clenched, his chest heaving. Mike shoved him toward the booth. "Sit down and sober up, man. You're done." The party limped on after that. Sarah tried to focus, but her mind was on Ethan. She texted him again. "You okay? Call me." No reply. She told herself he was just upset, probably already home in bed, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't go away. Liam, meanwhile, sat in silence, his anger simmering. He didn't join the karaoke or the toasts. Around 12:30 a.m., he grabbed his jacket and slipped out without a word. No one noticed him leave, not even Sarah, who was staring at her phone, waiting for Ethan's name to pop up. By 1 a.m., the party was winding down. The group started to scatter, some heading to late-night diners, others calling cabs. Sarah left with Jenna, still checking her phone. "He's probably asleep," Jenna said, trying to reassure her. "You know how Ethan is. He'll text you. In the morning." But morning came, and Ethan didn't text. His phone stayed off. His apartment stayed empty. By noon, John and Emily were at the police station filling out a missing person report. The officer, a kind woman named Detective Harris, took notes as Emily's voice broke. "He wouldn't just leave," Emily said, clutching a photo of Ethan in his graduation cap. "He was happy. He was coming home." Detective Harris nodded, but her face was grim. "We'll do everything we can," she said. "But sometimes, kids this age, they take off for a bit. We'll check with his friends, the bar, everywhere he might have gone." John's hands balled into fists. "He didn't take off. That's not Ethan." The police canvassed the area around the Rusty Anchor. They talked to Mike, Jenna, Sarah, and the other friends. Everyone said the same thing. Ethan left early, around midnight, alone. No one saw anything strange. No one mentioned Liam's outburst, not wanting to stir up trouble. Sarah told the police about her texts, her voice shaking as she admitted she hadn't heard back. Days turned into weeks. Flyers with Ethan's face went up around Boston. on lamp posts, in coffee shops, at the university. John and Emily barely slept, spending every moment calling hospitals, checking social media, driving to places Ethan used to go. But the trail was cold. No security footage caught him after he left the bar. No witnesses saw him on the street. Emily would sit in Ethan's room at night, holding his old hoodie, whispering prayers that he'd come home. John threw himself into work, but his eyes were hollow, his temper short. They were breaking piece by piece, and the world kept moving on without their son. Little did they know the answers were buried in that night, hidden in the anger, the jealousy, and the shadows that followed Ethan out the door. The days blurred into weeks, then months, with no sign of Ethan Carter. The flyers plastered around Boston began to fade, curling at the edges. Ethan's smiling face in his graduation cap, barely visible under rain and dust. John and Emily Carter clung to hope like a lifeline, but it was fraying fast. Their small house in Connecticut, once filled with Ethan's laughter and the hum of family life, felt like a museum of memories, silent, heavy, frozen in time. Emily spent hours in Ethan's room sitting on his bed, tracing her fingers over the posters on his walls. A Red Sox banner, a faded map of the world, a photo of him and his high school buddies at a beach bonfire. She'd open his desk drawers, hoping for a clue, a note, a receipt, anything. But all she found were old notebooks filled with code, a half-used bottle of cologne, and a worn-out baseball cap he used to wear everywhere. Each item was a punch to the gut, a reminder that her boy was gone. John, meanwhile, threw himself into the search. He'd taken a leave from his job at the hardware store, spending every day driving around Boston, talking to anyone who might have seen something. He went back to the Rusty Anchor so many times the staff knew him by name. He stood outside Ethan's apartment building, staring at the buzzer, willing his son to walk through the door. But the door stayed closed. The police weren't much help. Detective Harris, the officer handling Ethan's case, called with updates. But they were always the same. No new leads. "We've checked the security footage from the bar," she told John over the phone one gray October morning, 5 months after Ethan vanished. Nothing after he walked out. No activity on his phone or bank cards. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, but we're running out of places to look." John gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "He didn't just disappear," he said, his voice rough. "Someone knows something. You've got to keep looking." "We are," Harris said, but her tone was weary. "But you should prepare for the possibility that Ethan, maybe he left on his own." Emily overheard and shook her head fiercely. "No, Ethan wouldn't do that. He was happy. He had plans." Her voice broke, and she turned away, wiping her eyes. The truth was, Ethan had been happy. That night at the bar before the fight with Liam, he'd been glowing. He'd stood by Sarah, their shoulders brushing, talking about the future. He'd landed an interview with a tech startup in Cambridge, and he was already dreaming about moving out of his cramped student apartment, maybe even getting a place with Sarah someday. He'd texted his parents just before he left the party. Heading home. "Love you." Those were the last words they had from him. Back then, the night of the graduation party had felt like a blur to everyone. After Liam's outburst and Ethan's exit, the mood had shifted. Sarah had stepped outside to call Ethan, her heart racing from the argument. She'd stood on the sidewalk, the Boston night chilly against her bare arms, listening to his phone ring and ring before hitting voicemail. "Ethan, it's me," she'd said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry about Liam, just let me know you're okay." She'd gone back inside, trying to shake off her worry. Jenna had pulled her into a hug, saying, "He's probably just cooling off. You know how guys are." Sarah had nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. Liam, after storming out, hadn't gone far. He'd lingered outside the bar, pacing the sidewalk, his breath visible in the cold air. His head was spinning. Too much beer, too much anger. He'd seen Ethan leave, watched him walk down the street toward the T-station. For a moment, Liam had thought about following him, shouting all the things he hadn't said inside. But he didn't. Instead, he'd turned the other way, heading to his own apartment, slamming the door behind him, or so he told everyone later. The police questioned Liam, along with Mike, Jenna, and Sarah. Liam's story was simple. He'd gotten mad, made a scene, and left after Ethan. He said he went straight home, alone. No one could confirm it, but no one could disprove it either. The bar's security cameras didn't cover the street, and the nearby T-station had no footage of Ethan boarding a train. It was like he'd vanished into the night. Sarah blamed herself. She sat in her dorm room for weeks, replaying every moment of that night. If she'd gone after Ethan, if she'd stopped Liam's outburst, maybe things would have been different. She called Emily every few days, her voice small over the phone. "I should have done something," she'd say, and Emily would try to comfort her, even through her own tears. Mike and Jenna tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. Mike would text the group chat, hoping to keep things normal, but without Ethan, it felt wrong. Jenna organized a vigil on campus a month after he disappeared with candles and photos of Ethan. Hundreds showed up, classmates, professors, even strangers who'd seen the flyers. Emily and John stood in the crowd, holding each other as Sarah spoke through tears. "Ethan was the best of us," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "He was kind, he was smart, and he never gave up. We can't give up on him either." But as the months turned into a year, hope faded. The police scaled back their search. The flyers came down. Ethan's friends graduated, moved away, started their lives. Sarah got a job in New York, but she carried Ethan with her, a weight she couldn't shake. She'd dream about him sometimes, smile his laugh, and wake up crying, checking her phone for a message that never came. John and Emily's marriage strained under the grief. John grew quiet, retreating into himself. He'd sit in the garage tinkering with tools, avoiding Emily's eyes. Emily threw herself into keeping Ethan's memory alive. She started a blog posting updates about the case, begging for tips. She'd drive to Boston on weekends, handing out new flyers, talking to anyone who'd listen. But the world moved on, and the Carters were left behind. By the third year, Ethan's case was officially cold. Detective Harris stopped calling. The media lost interest. Emily and John's house became a shrine to their son, his room untouched, his photos on every wall. They didn't talk about it, but they both felt it. The fear that Ethan was gone forever, that they'd never know why. Emily would lie awake at night, clutching Ethan's old baseball cap, whispering the same prayer. "Please, God, bring him back, or at least let us know what happened." John would hear her through the walls, his own eyes wet, but he didn't know how to comfort her anymore. They were two people drowning in the same sea, too far apart to reach each other. One night, 5 years after Ethan disappeared, Emily sat in his room, sorting through his things for the 100th time. She opened his desk drawer, pulling out a stack of old notebooks. A small photo slipped out, fluttering to the floor. It was Ethan and Sarah laughing at a campus coffee shop, their hands almost touching. Emily stared at it, her heart twisting. She didn't know much about Sarah, just that she'd been close to Ethan. For a moment, she thought about calling her, but what was the point? Sarah had moved on, like everyone else. What Emily didn't know was that Sarah hadn't moved on. Not really. And somewhere, buried in the shadows of that graduation night, were secrets waiting to be uncovered, secrets that would take a decade more to come to light. By then, the truth would be both a balm and a blade, healing old wounds and opening new ones. The Connecticut house was quieter now, as if time itself had grown heavy. It was May 2025, 15 years since Ethan Carter vanished into the Boston night. The world had changed. Smartphones were sleeker. The Red Sox had won another World Series, and the college kids from that graduation party were now adults with jobs, families, and lives of their own. But for John and Emily Carter, time was stuck, tethered to a single night that refused to let them go. Emily moved slower these days, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes carrying a permanent shadow. She still kept Ethan's room exactly As he'd left it, a time capsule of a life interrupted. The posters were faded, the laptop outdated, but she dusted them weekly, as if Ethan might walk through the door any moment. John, his broad shoulders now slightly stooped, spent most of his time in the garage, fixing things that didn't need fixing. They spoke less, not because they loved each other less, but because words couldn't bridge the gap left by their sun-dart. One rainy afternoon, Emily was in Ethan's room sorting through his closet. It was something she did when the ache got too loud, a ritual to feel close to him. She pulled out a box of old clothes, the kind Ethan used to wear, hoodies, graphic tees, a pair of sneakers with frayed laces. Underneath, tucked in a corner, was a small wooden box she'd never noticed before. Her heart skipped as she opened it. Inside were letters, handwritten, folded neatly. There were photos, too. Ethan and Sarah, laughing at a campus picnic, studying in the library, standing by the Charles River with the city skyline behind them. Emily's hands trembled as she read the letters. They were from Sarah, written in the months before graduation. "I can't wait to see where we go next," one said. "You make everything better," said another. Ethan had loved her, and she'd loved him back. Emily's chest tightened. She'd known Sarah was important to Ethan, but not like this. "John!" she called, her voice sharp with urgency. He appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands, his face wary. "What is it?" he asked, stepping into the room. Emily held up a photo, her eyes wet. "Ethan had a girlfriend, Sarah. These are from her. We need to find her." John took the photo, studying Ethan's wide grin. Sarah's arm looped through his. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something. Hope, maybe, or just purpose. "Do we know where she is?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "She moved to New York after college. That's all I know, but she might know something about that night." They spent the next few days tracking Sarah down. It wasn't easy. She'd changed her last name after getting married, and social media only gave vague clues. But Emily was relentless, calling old college friends, digging through Ethan's blog comments for leads. Finally, a mutual friend connected them to Sarah Mitchell, now Sarah Evans, living in a quiet suburb outside New York City. John and Emily drove down on a Saturday, the car filled with a tense silence. The address led them to a small, tidy house with a swing set in the front yard. Sarah answered the door, and Emily's breath caught. She was older now, her hair shorter, her face lined with the years, but those same warm eyes from the photos stared back at them. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't expect—" "Come in, please." The living room was cozy, with kids' toys scattered on the rug and family photos on the walls. Sarah's husband was at work, her 2 kids at a soccer game. She offered them coffee, her hands fidgeting as she poured. "I think about Ethan all the time," she said, sitting across from them. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through." Emily clutched the wooden box, now in her lap. "We found this in his room," she said, sliding it toward Sarah. "Letters from you, photos. We didn't know how close you two were." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she opened the box. She touched a letter, her fingers tracing Ethan's, handwriting in the margins. "We were careful," she said. "We didn't want everyone knowing. It was new, but it was real." John leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Sarah, we need to know about that night, the graduation party. Anything you remember, anything that might tell us what happened to him." Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze distant. She told them about the party, how Ethan had been so happy, how they'd talked about their future. Then she got to Liam's outburst. "He was jealous," she said. "He'd had too much to drink, and he just lost it. He thought I was leading him on, but I never meant to. Ethan tried to calm him down, but it got ugly." Emily's heart raced. "Ugly how?" Sarah recounted the fight, Liam's shove, Ethan's restraint, the way Mike and Jenna broke it up. "Ethan left right after," she said. "He was upset, but he said he was going home. I texted him, called him, but—" Her voice broke. "He never answered." John's jaw tightened. "And Liam, what did he do after?" Sarah hesitated, her brow furrowing. He left maybe 20 minutes later. He was still angry, stormed out without saying goodbye. I didn't think much of it then. We were all shaken up. Emily and John exchanged a look. Liam. The name had come up before during the initial police interviews, but his story had checked out. No one saw him follow Ethan. No evidence tied him to anything. Still, something about it gnawed at John. "Did Liam ever talk to you after that night?" John asked. Sarah shook her head. "Not really. He moved away a few months later, got a job in Chicago, I think. We lost touch. I always felt, like he was hiding something. But I had no proof." Emily reached for Sarah's hand. "You're not to blame, Sarah. We just need to understand." Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. "I loved him," she whispered. "I never stopped, wondering what happened." Driving home, John and Emily were quiet, the wooden box between them like a silent passenger. Emily stared out the window, her mind racing. "We need to look into Liam," she said finally. "If he was that angry, maybe he did something." John nodded, his hands tight on the wheel. "I'll call Detective Harris tomorrow, see if she can dig up anything on him." But Harris wasn't optimistic. When John called, she sighed through the phone. "It's been 15 years, Mr. Carter. Liam was questioned back then. His story held up. Unless you've got new evidence, there's not much we can do." "Then we'll find evidence," John said, his voice hard. He wasn't giving up. Not now. Not when they finally had a thread to pull. Emily spent the next week scouring Ethan's blog, his old emails, anything that might mention Liam. She found a single post from a month before the party, where Ethan had written about a group project gone wrong. "Liam's been weird lately," he'd typed. "Keeps trying to one-up me. It's exhausting." It wasn't much, but it was enough to fuel their resolve. They hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Tom Reed, who agreed to take the case for a modest fee. "Cold cases are tough," Reed warned, sitting across from them in a diner. "But if there's something to find on this Liam guy, I'll find it." As Reed started digging, Emily kept returning to Ethan's room, to the wooden box. She read Sarah's letters again, each one a glimpse into a love she'd never known her son had. It broke her heart, but it also gave her strength. Ethan had been loved, deeply, and somewhere in the shadows of that night, the truth was waiting to be found. But the truth was a double-edged sword, and when it finally came, it would bring both answers and agony. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and greasy fries, a familiar haunt on the outskirts of Boston where John and Emily Carter met with Tom Reed, the private investigator they'd hired to chase down the ghost of their son's disappearance. It was late May 2025, and the summer heat was already creeping in, making the vinyl booth seat stick to Emily's legs. She clutched a manila folder filled with copies of Sarah's letters and printouts from Ethan's old blog, as if they could summon him back. Tom Reed, a stocky man with a gray buzz cut and a face like weathered leather, slid into the booth across from them. He'd been a cop for 20 years before going private, and his no-nonsense attitude was exactly what the Carters needed. "So," he said, flipping open a notebook, "you think this Liam guy's worth looking into. Tell me why." John leaned forward, his voice low but steady. He had a thing for Sarah, Ethan's girlfriend. Got into it with Ethan at the graduation party right before he went missing. Sarah said he was angry, left the bar not long after Ethan did. Emily pushed the folder toward Reed. "We found these in Ethan's room, letters from Sarah. They were closer than we knew, and Ethan wrote about Liam acting strange before the party, competitive, jealous." Reed skimmed the letters, his eyes narrowing at a photo of Ethan and Sarah by the Charles River. "Okay," he said, tapping his pen. "Liam's a lead, but 15 years is a long time. People move, change names, cover tracks. You got anything else on him?" "Not much," Emily admitted, her voice tight. "Sarah said he moved to Chicago after college. That's the last she heard." Reed nodded, jotting a note. "I'll start there. Social media, public records, old classmates. If he's still breathing, I'll find him. But I gotta warn you, cold cases like this, they don't always pan out. You sure you're ready for whatever we dig up? John's jaw tightened. We've been living with nothing for 15 years. Anything's better than that. Emily reached for John's hand, her fingers cold. We just want to know what happened to our boy. Reed gave them a long look, then tucked the folder under his arm. All right, I'll be in touch. The next few weeks were a blur of waiting. Emily went back to Ethan's room, reading his blog posts again, searching for anything she'd missed. John called Detective Harris, who'd worked Ethan's case back in 2010, but she was retired now, passing them to a new officer who sounded too young to care. We'll review the file, the officer said, but it felt like a brush-off. Reed, though, was a dog with a bone. He tracked Liam down in under a month. Liam Harper, now 37, was living in a Chicago suburb working as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech firm. He had a LinkedIn profile, a polished headshot, and a resume that screamed success. But Reed wasn't impressed by shiny surfaces. He dug deeper, pulling old records, talking to people who'd known Liam in college. What? He found raised red flags. Liam had moved 3 times in the 2 years after Ethan's disappearance. Boston to Seattle, Seattle to Denver, then Denver to Chicago. Each move was sudden, with no clear reason. People don't bounce around like that unless they're running. From something, Reed told John and Emily over the phone. Could be nothing, could be guilt. I'm going to need to talk to him. John's heart pounded. You think he knows what happened to Ethan? Too early to say, Reed cautioned. But his story from that night has holes. He told the police he went straight home after the party. But a bartender at the Rusty Anchor remembered seeing him outside, pacing maybe 20 minutes after Ethan left. That's not in the original report. Emily's breath caught. Why? Didn't anyone follow up on that? Reed sighed. Sloppy police work. Or maybe they didn't think it mattered. Bars are busy, memories are fuzzy, but it's something. Reed flew to Chicago the next week, tracking Liam to a sleek office building downtown. He didn't approach him directly, too risky. Instead, he watched, blending into the crowd of commuters. Liam looked older, his sharp features softened by time, but he carried himself with the same intensity Reed had read about. He worked late, kept to himself, didn't seem to have many friends. His apartment was a bland rental in a high-rise. No family photos, no personal touches. Guy lives like he's ready to bolt, Reed noted. Back in Connecticut, Emily and John waited for updates, their hope fragile but growing. Emily started dreaming about Ethan again, vivid dreams where he was standing in the backyard, smiling, saying, "I'm okay, Mom." She'd wake up sobbing, clutching his old baseball cap. John noticed her sleepless nights, but didn't know how to help. He was fighting his own demons, replaying that night in his head, wondering if they'd missed something obvious. Reed's next call came on a humid July evening. "Found something," he said, his voice clipped. "Liam's got a record, nothing big. A bar fight in Seattle, 2012. Settled out of court. But it shows he's got a temper. And I talked to an old classmate who said Liam was obsessed with Sarah back in college. Kept talking about her even after she moved to New York." Emily's hand shook as she held the phone. "What do we do now?" "I'm going to talk to him," Reed said. "Not accusing, just fishing, see how he reacts. If he's hiding something, he'll slip," John cut in. "Be careful. If he did something to Ethan—" "I know how to handle guys like him," Reed said. "I'll keep you posted." The meeting happened at a coffee shop near Liam's office. Reed played it casual, saying he was investigating an old case for a client, fishing for details about the 2010 graduation party. Liam was guarded, his answers clipped. "Yeah, I remember that night," he said, stirring his coffee. "Ethan left early. I went home after. That's it." But Reed noticed the way Liam's eyes flicked away, the slight tremor in his hand. "You and Ethan got into it, right?" Reed pressed. "Over Sarah?" Liam's jaw tightened. "It was nothing. Just a dumb argument. I was drunk." Reed nodded, letting it drop. But he didn't buy it. Liam's story was too clean, too rehearsed. He thanked him, left the coffee shop, and called the Carters. "He's nervous," Reed said. "Didn't admit anything, but he's not telling the whole truth either. I'm going to dig into his old roommates, see if anyone heard him say anything. Weird back then. Emily and John sat at their kitchen table, the folder of Sarah's letters open in front of them. "What if Liam did something to Ethan?" Emily whispered. "What if he's the reason our boy's gone?" John took her hand, his voice steady but raw. "If he is, we'll make sure he pays." They didn't know it yet, but Reed's investigation was about to crack open a truth that had been buried for 15 years. The pieces were falling into place, but each one came with a cost. The Carters were ready to face the answers, but they weren't ready for the pain those answers would bring. The summer heat hung heavy over Connecticut, but inside the Carter house, the air felt colder, charged with a restless energy. Emily and John sat at their kitchen table, the manila folder of Sarah's letters now joined by a stack of notes from Tom Reed, their private investigator. His system. It was July 2025, 15 years since Ethan's disappearance, and the Carters were closer to answers than ever before. But with every step closer, the weight of what they might find grew heavier. Reed's call came on a sticky Tuesday evening. Emily picked up the phone, her heart racing. "Got something," Reed said, his gruff voice cutting through the line. "Liam's story's starting to crack." John leaned in, his hands clenched. "What did you find?" "Talked to an old roommate of his from Seattle," Reed said. "Guy named Derek. Said Liam came home one night in 2010, not long after your son went missing. He was a mess. Drunk, rattled, kept muttering about a fight. Derek thought he was just upset about a girl, but Liam said something weird. I didn't mean for it to go that far." Never explained what he meant. Emily's breath caught. "You think he was talking about Ethan?" "Maybe," Reed said. Derek didn't push him on it back then, thought it was just drunk talk. But here's the kicker. Liam moved out a week later, no notice. Left half. His stuff behind. John's voice was hard. "He was running. Looks like it," Reed said. "I'm heading back to Chicago tomorrow. Gonna lean on Liam again, see if I can shake him." Emily gripped John's arm. "Be careful, Tom. If he's hiding something." "I know," Reed said. "I'll play it smart." The next day, Reed sat across from Liam at a Chicago diner, the kind of place with checkered floors and waitresses who called you Hyun. Liam looked polished in a button-down shirt, but his eyes were wary, darting to the door. Reed sipped. His coffee, casual as ever. "Just tying up loose ends on an old case," he said. "Ethan Carter. You remember him?" Liam's face tightened, but he nodded. "Yeah, college friend, disappeared after a party." "Right," Reed said, watching him closely. "You two got into it that night, didn't you, over Sarah?" Liam shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping the table. "It was a stupid argument. I was drunk, said some things I shouldn't have." Reed leaned forward. "Your old roommate Derek said you came home that night, talking about how things went too far. What did you mean by that?" Liam froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "What? I don't remember saying that." "Derek does," Reed said, his voice calm but sharp. "Said you were freaked out, packed up and left town a week later." Liam's eyes narrowed. "Derek's got a big mouth. I moved for a job, that's all." Reed nodded, letting the silence stretch. "Sure, jobs make you move. But here's the thing, people don't usually bolt like that unless they're scared. So what were you scared of, Liam?" Liam's jaw clenched. "You're fishing. I don't know anything about Ethan." "Maybe," Reed said, sliding a photo across the table, a picture of Ethan and Sarah from the wooden box. "But you knew he was with Sarah, and you didn't like it." Liam pushed the photo back, his hand shaking. "I'm done here." He stood, tossing a few bills on the table, and walked out. Reed watched him go, noting the stiffness in his stride. He called the Carters that night. "He's rattled," he told them. "Wouldn't look me in the eye. I'm going to tail him for a couple days, see what he does." Emily's heart pounded. "You think he'll lead you somewhere?" "If he's guilty, he might," Reed said. "Guys like him don't sit easy with secrets." Back in Connecticut, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat in Ethan's room, holding the photo of him and Sarah, her mind racing. John found her there, his face etched with exhaustion. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. "No," she whispered. What if he hurt Ethan? How do we live with that?" John pulled her close, his voice rough. "We find the truth. That's how." Reed's next move was to contact Detective Harris's replacement, a young officer named Martinez. He shared what he'd learned about Liam's sudden moves and Derek's story. Martinez was skeptical, but agreed to look into it. 15 years is a long time, he warned. Evidence is going to be tough to come by. "Then find some," John snapped over the phone. Emily squeezed his hand, calming him. They couldn't afford to lose Martinez. Reed dug deeper, tracking down another old friend of Liam's, a woman named Claire who'd lived in Denver during Liam's short stay there. Claire was hesitant but opened up after Reed's persistent charm. "Liam was weird back then," she said over coffee. "Quiet, jumpy. He'd get these calls and just shut down. One time he got drunk and started talking about a mistake he made in college. Said it ruined his life." "What kind of mistake?" Reed asked. Claire shrugged. "He didn't say. Just kept repeating, 'I didn't mean it.' I thought he was talking about a breakup or something." Reed's gut told him it was more than that. He thanked Claire and called Martinez, pushing for a background check on Liam's movements in 2010. Meanwhile, he kept an eye on Liam, noticing his late-night drives to a wooded area outside Chicago. "He's visiting a spot in the woods," Reed told the Carters. "No reason to be out there unless he's hiding something." Emily's stomach churned. "You think Ethan's out there?" "Don't know yet," Reed said, "but I'm going to find out." John and Emily drove to Boston to meet Martinez, who agreed to coordinate with Chicago PD. The Carters sat in a small police station office surrounded by files and coffee cups as Martinez laid out the plan. "We'll follow Reed's lead, check the woods. But I need you to understand, without physical evidence, we can't do much." John's voice was steel. "Then get a warrant. Search his place." Martinez hesitated. "We need probable cause. A drunk conversation from 15 years ago won't cut it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Our son is gone. Isn't that enough?" Martinez softened. "I'm on your side, Mrs. Carter. We'll do what we can." That night, Reed followed Liam to the woods again. It was a quiet spot, dense with trees, far from the city lights. Liam parked his car, grabbed a flashlight, and walked into the forest. Reed stayed back, silent, watching. Liam stopped at a small clearing, staring at the ground for a long time before leaving. Reed marked the spot, his heart heavy with suspicion. The next day he called Martinez. "Get a team out here," he said. "I think we've got something." As the police prepared to search, Emily and John sat in their hotel room holding each other. The years of pain, the endless questions, were coming to a head. They didn't know what Reed would find in those woods, but they knew it would change. Everything. The truth was closer than ever, and it was going to hurt. The Chicago woods were quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a highway. It was early August 2025, and the air was thick with humidity as a small team of police officers moved through the trees, their flashlights cutting through the dawn haze. Tom Reed, the private investigator, stood at the edge of the clearing he'd marked, his face grim. He'd watched Liam Harper come here twice, lingering like a man haunted. Now the police were here to find out why. John and Emily Carter waited. In a hotel room in Chicago, their hands clasped tightly. They hadn't slept, their eyes fixed on the phone. Every minute felt like an hour. Emily's mind raced, replaying Ethan's smile, his voice, the way he'd hugged her after his graduation. John stared at the wall, his jaw set, bracing for whatever news came next. Officer Martinez, the young detective who had taken over Ethan's case, led the search. He'd managed to get a warrant based on Reed's findings, Liam's suspicious moves after the party, his nervous behavior, and the late-night visits to this isolated spot. A forensics team followed, carrying shovels and evidence bags. Reed pointed to the clearing, a patch of earth where the grass seemed thinner, the soil slightly uneven. "Here," Reed said, his voice low. "This is where he stopped." Martinez nodded, motioning for the team to start digging. The sound of shovels hitting dirt echoed in the quiet, a steady rhythm that made Reed's stomach churn. He'd seen a lot in his years as a cop, but this felt different. Personal. Back in the hotel, Emily's phone buzzed. She grabbed it, her heart in her throat. It was Martinez. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice careful, "we found something. Remains. We're sending them for testing, but you should prepare yourselves." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping. John pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "Is it him?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know yet," Martinez said. "The lab will run DNA. It'll take a couple days." The call ended, and the room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Emily clung to John, her body shaking. "It's Ethan," she whispered. "I know it's him." John didn't answer, just held her tighter. He wanted to believe it wasn't true, that there was still a chance Ethan was out there, alive. But deep down, he knew. In Chicago, the police brought Liam in for questioning. He sat in a stark interrogation room, his polished exterior fraying. Martinez sat across from him, a file open on the table. Reed watched through the one-way glass, his arms crossed. "Liam," Martinez started, his tone even, "we found remains in the woods you've been visiting. Care to explain why you keep going out there?" Liam's face paled, but he shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about. I go for walks. Clear my head." "Walks?" Martinez repeated, sliding a photo of the clearing across the table. "Same spot, multiple times. You told Reed you didn't know anything about Ethan. Carter's disappearance. But your old roommate, Derek, says you came home that night in 2010 talking about a fight going too far." Liam's hands clenched under the table. "Derek's lying. I didn't say that." Martinez leaned forward. "Here's the thing, Liam. We've got your moves mapped out. Boston to Seattle, Seattle to Denver, Denver to Chicago. You ran every time things got hot. And now we've got remains in a spot you can't seem to stay away from. You want to keep lying, or you want to tell me what happened?" Liam's eyes darted to the door, then back to Martinez. "I want a lawyer," he said, his voice tight. Martinez nodded, unfazed. "Fine, but you should know the lab's working fast. If those remains are Ethan Carter's, and we tie them to you, it's over." Liam didn't answer, but his hands were shaking now. Reed, watching from behind the glass, felt a grim satisfaction. He'd seen enough guilty men to know Liam was cracking. 2 days later, the lab results came back. Martinez called the Carters, his voice heavy. "It's Ethan," he said. "The DNA matches. I'm so sorry." Emily collapsed into a chair, her sobs filling the room. John stood frozen, his face a mask of grief and rage. "Where was he?" he managed to ask. "A clearing in the woods, about 10 miles outside Chicago," Martinez said. We're building a case against Liam. He's not talking yet, but we've got enough to hold him." John's voice was raw. "What did he do to my son?" Martinez hesitated. "We don't know the details yet. But we think it wasn't planned. We'll get the truth." The Carters drove to Chicago the next day, their hearts shattered, but their resolve unbroken. They met Martinez at the police station, where he showed them a map of the clearing. "It's a quiet spot," he said. "No one would have found him without Reed's tip." Emily's hands trembled as she clutched Ethan's photo, the one from his graduation. "Can we see it?" she asked. "The place where he was?" Martinez nodded. "We can arrange that, but it's not easy, Mrs. Carter." "I need to," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. "He's my son." The clearing was smaller than they'd imagined, a patch of earth surrounded by dense trees. The police had marked it off with tape, but the digging was done, the remains carefully removed. Emily knelt by the spot, her fingers brushing the soil. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "We should have found you sooner." John stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the ground. He couldn't speak, couldn't find words for the pain tearing through him. All he could see was Ethan, his boy, his pride, left here, alone for 15 years. Reed joined them, his face somber. "We're close," he said. "Liam's lawyer's pushing for a deal. I think he'll talk soon." Back at the station, Liam was breaking. Alone in his cell, the weight of 15 years pressed down on him. The night of the party played in his mind like a loop. Ethan leaving the bar, Liam following, his anger fueled by jealousy and beer. They'd argued again out on the dark street, words turning to shouts. Liam had pushed Ethan harder than he meant to. Ethan fell, his head hitting the curb. He didn't get up. Panicked, Liam had dragged him to his car, driven to the woods and buried him in the clearing. He told himself it was an accident, that he hadn't meant to hurt him. But the guilt followed him through every move, every sleepless night. "I didn't mean to kill him," Liam finally told his lawyer, his voice breaking. "It was a fight. It got out of hand." The lawyer relayed the confession to Martinez, who called the Carters. "Liam's talking," he said. "He's saying it was an accident, but he's admitting he buried Ethan to cover it up. We've got him on manslaughter, maybe second-degree murder." Emily's voice was barely audible. "He took our son." "I know," Martinez said. "He's not walking away from this." As the police built their case, John and Emily sat in the clearing again, a small bouquet of flowers in Emily's hands. They didn't know how to say goodbye, not after so long, but they knew Ethan deserved peace. And so did they. The truth was out, but it wasn't the end. There was one more piece to the puzzle, one more person who'd carried Ethan's memory, in silence all these years. The Chicago air was crisp as autumn crept in, the leaves turning gold and red around the small clearing where Ethan Carter's remains had been found. It was September 2025, and John and Emily Carter stood by the patch of earth that had held their son for 15 years, a bouquet of white roses resting where his body had been. The police tape was gone now, but the weight of the truth lingered, heavy as the morning dew. Liam Harper was in custody, his confession tying him to Ethan's death. A reckless fight, a fatal fall, a desperate cover-up. But for the Carters, knowing what happened didn't fill the hole in their hearts. It only made it sharper. Emily knelt by the clearing, her fingers brushing the soil. "We found you, baby," she whispered, tears streaking her face. John stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his own eyes glistening. They'd spent half their lives searching, and now they had answers, but no Ethan to bring home. Back in Connecticut, they'd asked Detective Martinez to keep them updated on Liam's case. He'd been charged with manslaughter, with the possibility of second-degree murder if the prosecution could prove intent. His lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, but the Carters didn't care about the details. Justice was coming, but it wouldn't bring their son back. What they didn't expect was another piece of the story, one that had been hidden not by Liam, but by someone closer to Ethan's heart. Sarah Evans, the girl from the wooden box of letters, had carried her own secret all these years. It started with a call from Sarah, a week after the police confirmed Ethan's remains. Emily answered, her voice weary. "Sarah?" she said, surprised. They hadn't spoken since their visit to her New York home months ago. "Mrs. Carter," Sarah said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I need to tell you something about Ethan. Can we meet?" John and Emily drove to Sarah's house the next day, the familiar New York suburbs blurring past their car windows. Sarah greeted them at the door, her face pale, her hands twisting a dish towel. Her kids were at school, her husband at work. The house felt quiet, almost too still. "I should have told you sooner," Sarah said, as they sat in her living room, a photo of Ethan and her on the coffee table. "But I didn't know how, and I wasn't sure. Until now." Emily leaned forward, her heart racing. "What is it, Sarah?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes distant. "A year after Ethan disappeared, I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about that night, the fight with Liam, how Ethan never made it home. I started looking on my own. I'd drive around Boston, check places he might have gone. One day I ended up in those woods outside Chicago." John's brow furrowed. "The, woods? How did you know to go there?" Sarah's voice wavered. "I didn't. Not really. I'd heard Liam moved to Chicago, and I I don't know, I just had a feeling. I was in grad school by then, but I'd take weekends to search. I found that clearing by chance, hiking one day. There was this spot where the ground looked different, like it had been disturbed. I didn't know it was Ethan, but I felt him. Does that make sense? Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. It does, Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I started going back every year, on the anniversary of his disappearance. I'd leave flowers, say a prayer. I called it Ethan's place. I never told anyone, not even my husband. It was my way of keeping him close. John's voice was thick. You were visiting him all this time? Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I didn't know it was really him until I saw the news about the remains. When you came to me with those letters, I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was crazy, imagining things. But now, I know it was him. Emily reached for Sarah's hand, her voice soft. You loved him. I did, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I still do. He was my first love, the kind you never forget. I kept thinking, if I'd stopped him that night, if I'd gone with him. No, Emily said firmly. This isn't your fault. It's Liam's. Sarah shook her head. I don't hate Liam. I feel sorry for him. He was jealous, angry, but I don't think he meant to hurt Ethan. Not like that. But he has to face what he did. John's jaw tightened. He will. Sarah led them to a small box on her bookshelf, pulling out a journal. I wrote about every visit to the clearing, she said. Dates. What I left there. I even took pictures. I thought, maybe it'll help the police. They drove to Chicago the next week, Sarah with them, to meet Martinez. She handed over her journal, pages filled with neat handwriting, photos of the clearing with flowers tucked into the earth. I don't know if this changes anything, she said, but I owed it to Ethan. Martinez flipped through the journal, his expression unreadable. This shows someone was honoring the site. Long before we found it, he said. It strengthens the case against Liam. Shows he picked a place no one would find, but you did. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to be close to him. The Carters and Sarah went to the clearing together, a quiet pilgrimage. Sarah knelt where she'd left flowers all those years, her fingers brushing the ground. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, she whispered. Emily joined her, placing her own bouquet beside Sarah's. You kept him company, she said. That means more than you know. John stood back, his hands in his pockets, watching the two women who'd loved his son. He felt a mix of grief and gratitude, a strange peace settling over him. Ethan hadn't been alone, not entirely. Sarah's visits, her quiet devotion, had kept his memory alive. As they left the clearing, Sarah turned to Emily. I want to do something for him, she said. Maybe a scholarship or a memorial. Something to make sure he's remembered. Emily smiled, through her tears. We'd like that. Back home, the Carters began to plan. They contacted Ethan's old university, proposing a scholarship in his name for computer science students. Sarah offered to help, her own grief finding purpose. They didn't know it yet, but this would be their way forward, a way to carry Ethan's light into the future. But first, there was one last step, a final reckoning with the man who'd taken him away, and a chance to say goodbye. The Connecticut sky was clear and blue, the kind of October day in 2025 that reminded Emily Carter of Ethan's graduation, bright, full of promise, yet tinged with an ache that never quite faded. She and John stood in their backyard, a small wooden plaque in their hands, etched with Ethan's name and the words, "Forever our light." They'd decided to create a memorial here, a quiet place to honor their son, now that they knew where he'd been all those years. The Chicago clearing had given them answers, but it was this spot, under the oak tree where Ethan used to read as a kid, that felt like home. Emily knelt, her fingers brushing the plaque, as John secured it into the ground. "This is for you, Ethan," she whispered. "We'll always love you." John stood beside her, his voice thick. "You'll never be forgotten, son." The past few months had been a whirlwind of pain and purpose. Liam Harper's trial was Underway, his confession laying bare the truth of that night in 2010. In the Chicago police station, under the weight of evidence, Sarah's journal, Reed's findings, the remains in the clearing, Liam had broken down. He'd told the full story, his voice shaking as he recounted the fight that ended Ethan's life. It was outside the Rusty Anchor, minutes after Ethan left the graduation party. Liam, fueled by jealousy and alcohol, had followed him down the dark Boston street. "I just wanted to talk," Liam said in the interrogation room, his hands covering his face. "I was mad about Sarah, about everything. I didn't mean to hurt him." But the argument had escalated. Words turned to shouts, then to shoves. Liam pushed Ethan harder than he intended, and Ethan fell, his head striking the curb. He didn't move. Panicked, Liam had dragged him to his car, driven to the woods outside Chicago, where he'd been visiting family that weekend, and buried him in the clearing. "I thought I could forget," Liam said, tears streaming, "but I never did." The prosecution pushed for second-degree murder, arguing Liam's jealousy showed intent. His lawyer countered with manslaughter, claiming it was a tragic accident. The Carters didn't care about the legal terms. They sat in the courtroom holding hands as the judge sentenced Liam to 20 years. It was justice, but it didn't bring Ethan back. Sarah was there, too, in the back of the courtroom, her face pale but resolute. She'd testified about the party, about Liam's anger, about her years of visiting the clearing. After the sentencing, she approached John and Emily outside the courthouse, her eyes red but steady. "I'm glad he's paying for what he did," she said, "but I'm so sorry it came to this." Emily hugged her, a mother's embrace. "You kept Ethan's memory alive," she said. "That's more than we could have asked." John nodded, his voice gruff. "Your family now, Sarah?" "Always will be." Together, they'd worked on the Ethan Carter Memorial Scholarship at Northeastern University. It was Sarah's idea, but John and Emily poured their hearts into it, raising funds through Ethan's old blog and donations from friends. The scholarship would support computer science students, kids like Ethan, who dreamed big and worked hard. At the launch ceremony held on campus, Sarah spoke to a small crowd, her voice steady despite the tears. "Ethan was the kind of person who made everyone better," she said. "He was kind, brilliant, and never gave up. This scholarship is our way of keeping his spirit alive, of giving other kids a chance to shine like he did." Emily stood beside her, clutching a photo of Ethan in his graduation cap. She didn't speak, she couldn't, but her presence said enough. John, usually so reserved, added a few words. "Our son loved this play," he said, gesturing to the campus. "He'd be proud to know he's helping others follow their dreams." The crowd applauded, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a flicker of peace. It wasn't the end of their grief, it never would be, but it was a step toward healing. They'd lost Ethan, but they'd found a way to carry him forward. Sarah, too, found solace in the scholarship. She'd spent 15 years carrying Ethan's memory, visiting that clearing, whispering prayers to a boy she'd loved. Now she could honor him openly, with purpose. She'd started a small tradition of her own, leaving a single white rose at the clearing every year, even after the truth came out. "It's not about the past anymore," she told her husband one night. "It's about keeping Ethan with me." The Carters returned to the clearing one last time, a month after the trial. Sarah joined them, and they stood together in the quiet, the trees whispering in the breeze. The spot was marked now, not with police tape, but with a small stone, engraved with Ethan's name and dates, 1990-2010. Emily placed a bouquet of roses beside it, her fingers lingering on the stone. "We love you," she said softly. Sarah knelt, adding her own rose. "You were my first love," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." John stood back, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the horizon. He didn't speak, but his heart was full of grief, of love, of gratitude for the people who'd helped them find their son. He thought of Ethan's laugh, his quick wit, the way he'd light up a room, That light wasn't gone. Not really. It lived in the scholarship, in Sarah's devotion in the plaque under the oak tree. As they walked back to the car, Emily took John's hand, her voice soft. "We did right by him, didn't we?" John squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "Yeah, Em, we did." They drove home under a sky streaked with pink and gold, the weight of 15 years lifting just a little. Ethan was gone, but he wasn't lost anymore. His story, their story, would live on, in the scholarship, in the memories, in the love that refused to fade. Life moved forward. John went back to the hardware store, his smile a little easier now. Emily started volunteering, helping other families of missing children, her strength a quiet force. Sarah raised her kids, telling them stories of a boy who taught her what love meant. And every year on the anniversary of Ethan's graduation, they'd meet at the clearing or the oak tree, sharing memories, keeping his light alive. The pain would always be there, but so would the love. And in that balance, they found a way to live again. YouTube outro. Wow, what a journey. Thanks for sticking with us through Ethan's story. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, hasn't it? If this story touched you, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and let us know in the comments what you think. Did you see the twist coming? What would you do in the Carters' shoes? Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story. It's going to be another wild ride. Until then, take care, and we'll see you soon.